a lot of our presentation is going to actually focus on the investigation itself, getting down to when there is a case of a fraudulent script or something that just doesn't smell right, on what to do as far as handling it, and then our perspective as well as what we need as far as the evidence to prosecute a case that we can give to a district attorney's office. And so, again, we're going to give you some of the criminal investigative process here, some of the basic steps that we have to do in order to get a successful prosecution. We'll give you the legal authority that DPS detectives have. It's one of the things that with the investigation division, by statute, we're the primary law enforcement agency when it comes down to pharmaceutical and prescription drug abuse cases. And then also about what to do when you receive a fraudulent or suspicious script. We'll also talk about some of the other crimes that are involved with prescription drug abuse and diversion. When we get down to prescription or pharmaceutical diversion, when you're getting somebody who's doctor shopping, there's actually several felonies involved. It's not just the fraudulent script itself, but we'll talk about burglary, but that's actually another crime that's committed when the individual comes into the pharmacy and actually tries to pick up a fraudulent script or pass a fraudulent script. We'll talk about some of the profits that will be made with illegal sales and kind of break down the numbers as why individuals get involved with this. It's not necessarily just about abuse. I think some people think that when we talk about prescription drug abuse, it's all about the abuse cycle. But when you get down to it, there's a lot of individuals who are able to make a lot of money off of pharmaceutical abuse when they have connections with scripts or individuals that work in doctor's offices and are able to get those drugs themselves and then profit it on the street. And we'll talk about some of the trafficking or the tracking the pharmacy inventory and some tips and techniques. And some of the information that we're giving you tonight is just not only our perspective, but it's also from other pharmacists as well. One of the individuals in particular is the chief of the pharmacy board in Arkansas, who recently did a presentation, and when I was speaking with him, giving me all kinds of information as what he likes to see as far as not only prosecution, but as far as pharmacy control as well. So, yep, it's true. Old MacDonald, he ran a farm, P-H-A-R-M, that is. So, nothing new under the sun, for those of you who know your Latin quite well. And when we talk about pharmaceutical abuse and prescription drug abuse, a lot of people think that this is something recent. I know the recent case in Reno with the Dr. Rand investigation makes it seem like this was something that just came out of nowhere. But when you get down to a lot of these pharmaceutical cases, they've been around. Prescription drug abuse has been around for a long time. Ever since we've had prescription drugs, we've had the abuse. Anytime you have any type of substance or chemical. You can see this old ad here for the cube morphine in its old state back in the late 1800s. And now you can see the newer prescription vial for it. Of course, we got Prince here, you know, with his $800 million estate. But that was one of the things that when it first came out, people were talking about, you know, did Prince have this drug abuse problem? And then some people, you know, all his close entourage, no, he was clean, he was sterile, he was a straight edge, he would never get into that. And then it started to slowly come out that, nah, he might have had a pain addiction problem, and that might would have led up to his death. Of course, we have the recent event, of course, with the Dr. Rand case out of Reno, and Detective Coley over there, who's trying to hide in the shadows with his Duck Dynasty beard. Can't miss him there. He's actually one of the individuals who participated in that investigation. So again, we talk about some of the more nationwide cases. Again, it's just not anything that's exclusive to Nevada or to our area. It's happening everywhere. The DPS Investigation Division actually has detectives assigned to the Tactical Diversion Squad with DEA, and that's pretty much all they do is these script cases and these pharmaceutical pill cases, but they do them at a level where it's trafficking. Pretty much the U.S. Attorney's Office in Las Vegas does not want to see just a couple pills or any individual that has, you know, a few vials here and there they're trafficking. They're usually 1,000 pill minimum is what they're looking at for prosecution on the federal side. And when you think about 1,000 pills, that's quite a bit. And we'll break down the math here in a few minutes as to how much money can be made. But one of the things that our tactical diversion investigators are seeing is in Las Vegas, it's so rampant that these cases, these individuals are coming into Las Vegas. They're getting these pills, obtaining them through a number of ways, whether through fraudulent scripts, individuals working behind the counters, individuals working in doctor's offices who are issuing scripts fictitiously under the doctor's name, and then diverting those pills to other parts of the country. A recent case they had involved Omaha, Seattle, Ohio, there was actually quite a few cases that had nexus to Las Vegas, but to several parts within the nation. So it gives you that idea that it's just not here and there, it's everywhere. And of course, do you know someone who has abused prescription painkillers and suffered major harmful effects? When I saw the poll quiz, I don't know if it was a legitimate poll, I don't think it had any big statistical value, but I mean, it was almost like 90% yes. And it just goes to show that so many people have experienced some type of form of prescription drug abuse. And really, when you get down to it, we hear about a lot of the sports athletes and these stars that get injured, or other persons that get injured, and usually the channel was through prescription meds. They get hooked because they were taking some type of opioid, and then next thing you know, they're hooked on it and they can't get off. I mean, me personally, I had a relative, worked in the medical field, got hooked on opioid drugs, and unfortunately she passed away. And it was the same thing, got hooked on the pain medication because of a severe accident she had, and she had the access to it, and that's what happened to her. So again, it's not just a one-person thing, it's everywhere. So when we talk about these prescription drugs, they do share a similarity with many of the other drugs, with methamphetamine, heroin, and I'm not talking about the physical properties, I'm talking about what they have as far as the street value and the abuse and the potential for addiction. But when we look at it, the legal drug versus the illegal, again, there's that perception that because it's a prescribed drug, that it's better. I know one of the things I used to just bang my head against the wall when we would have some of these pill cases years and years ago is trying to get people to understand that this is a crime when you get somebody who's doctor shopping, and granted they might have had some type of addiction, but they were seeing multiple doctors, they were doing things that were felonies, going inside these stores under false pretenses to commit a crime, which is a felony, it's burglary. And some of the prosecutors would just see that, well, it's just a pill case. And this kind of goes back to that old idea, well, it's just a housewife thing. Well, it's not a housewife thing. This was a problem that we were seeing, but people just didn't want to give it the severity that it deserved because it's a clean drug. It's a prescribed drug. Doctors don't, deal out, illegal drugs. And that's what we would see. I think the first time that actually saw it as a law enforcement officer was actually my next door neighbor. Just moved into my first home in Winnemucca. I had this nice house, nice quiet neighborhood right behind the Mormon church, had, nice quiet parking lot, good view of the mountains. And within a couple weeks started noticing traffic coming in and out of my neighbor's door. Like, great. So I tell my partner, he does the case, we get a search warrant, we get inside. And we found very little methamphetamine. I think if anything, we were probably scraping the bags to try to get residue to test. What we found, though, was the pills. And the thing that was amazing to me was my partner, who was a drug recognition expert like Deputy Cheney, started picking up right away the signs and symptoms on her with the flaccid skin, the droopy eyes, the way she was talking to him. And he knew right away that she was a pill popper. And so he starts quizzing her, and the next thing you know, yep, she had a connection to a doctor in another town. And she would make her rounds throughout, the state. And, kind of she had a boyfriend on the side, but then she had the boyfriend who was giving her the pills. And that's what she was hooked on. The other time when it kind of hit me like a 2-ton heavy thing, like this Acme piano falling out of a window, was when I was working undercover at the 2004 Burning Man event. And during that time, we would use synthetic drugs or fake drugs as we're doing our drug transactions because, the code of Burning Man is, there's no sales. Other than ice and coffee, the only drugs out there that you're supposed to get are the ones that you give freely out of love and respect to your fellow man. And so what we were doing is doing this operation. It was actually, if you can see Dave Jones back there at the pharmacy board table, he was our lieutenant at the time. He was actually deputy chief for NDI. He gave us some of these, they were the pseudo pills, they were the fake pills, the placebos that we'd get from the pharmaceuticals, and we'd use those for the drug transactions. So I had the 40 and the 80 with the OxyContin. So I'm going and doing this buy, and I'm dressed like this clown. I look like an idiot, but I'm doing my undercover buy, and so I tried transacting, with some fake LSD that I had. They didn't want it. So when I popped out the pills, it was like moths to the light. All of a sudden, now I had all these people in this dance camp coming to me asking for oxys. And so I'm doling it out. I'm trying to remember their name because I'm trying to give the bus signal to my team. Like, hey, come in and get these guys. We got a good one here. And easily, I think I had like 5 or 6 individuals right away who were taking the pills and actually popping them in the mouth. Now, the instructions I had was not to let the pills go. I was supposed to keep track of the pills and give them back to Dave at the end of the night or at the end of the event, but unfortunately it didn't happen, so I was a little bit short. But it really hit me then that, wow, all these people knew exactly what the type of pills were. They knew the color, they knew the types, and here they are popping them in their mouth, and I can't get them back, but I knew right away, like, wow, there's something going on with this prescription thing. And as we started to work more pill cases when I left that Burning Man event and went back to my office, I could start to see that, yeah, there is quite a bit of a problem here. So when we talk about prescription drug fraud, how often does it occur and when? A lot of people think it's just fraudulent scripts, but it goes beyond that. We talk about doctor shopping, pharmacy robberies, and the burglaries. That's one of the things that when I talk to my counterparts throughout the country and that work at state level drug enforcement agencies, they'll talk about the increase that they start to see with burglaries and robberies with the pharmacies. Now, you're all familiar with the prescription drug monitoring program. And that's going to have a lot of good impacts. One of the things that we're starting to see throughout the country and sharing information amongst other law enforcement agencies is that as we start to have more controls on pharmaceutical drugs, that's going to cause these individuals to go to other places or other avenues to get them. So of course we're going to see the pharmacy burglaries, the robberies. And one of the things that we talk about is that while we're focusing on the opioid epidemic and the prescription drug problem, the thing is we can't get too close-minded or our eyes too close to what we're not seeing, what's going on with these unintended consequences. And one of the things they talk about throughout other parts of the country is the increases in heroin. So, for example, New York. With New York, they have to, when they dispense an opioid pain medication, it's no longer on the paper script. They use the electronic filing system, that goes from the doctor directly to the pharmacy. And so, of course, they're starting to see a decrease in the opioid abuse that way. But one of the things they're going to start to see is the increase in the heroin, because when individuals can't get the opioid in one form, they're going to get it in another. And that's when you're going to start to see that the heroin start to increase. During the recent NASDA conference, and NASDA is the National Alliance of State Drug Enforcement Agencies that I participate with, I represent Nevada, is they were talking about how heroin, 90% of the heroin that's coming into the United States is coming through Mexico. Mexico is the primary manufacturer of heroin. We used to think that it was all coming from, the Golden Triangle and other parts of the world, but Mexico has stepped up in that production and that importation of heroin. And so as we start to see a lot of these prescription drugs start to have controls on them, and especially here in northern Nevada where the recent case where it's a hot topic, one of the things that we're going to start to see is that increase in heroin, and I guess that's kind of the warning that I give to not only you but to us as law enforcement, is our work with pharmaceutical, drug diversion and abuse is going to be great, but we also need to focus on the unintended consequences, like I said, of what else is going to be starting to pop up, and that's where we're going to start to see that heroin come across. One of the problems with heroin, if you're familiar with, is a lot of individuals or gangs are starting to cut it with fentanyl, and fentanyl being a powerful drug as it is, and we're starting to see the overdoses. I know that News 4 did a story, I think about 2 months ago, talking about the fentanyl overdoses occurring in Sacramento and asking law enforcement agencies in northern Nevada if they had seen it. We haven't seen it here, but it's not to say that fentanyl is not there. If a lot of our heroin is coming from California, which a lot of it is, then in time, it's just a matter of numbers that eventually that fentanyl is going to start making its way here. I know like Sergeant Elges in the corner there, his street enforcement team with Douglas County, they work quite a bit with TriNet. And they get a lot of heroin cases, and what they're seeing a lot of is these individuals, these gangs coming out of Central California, Sacramento area that are trafficking heroin into the areas, trying to set up shop. So it's just a matter of time, if that's where the fentanyl is, we're going to probably start to see that as well. One of the things that I learned from John Kirtley, he's the executive director of the Arkansas State Board of Pharmacy. He's Larry Pinson's counterpart in that state. But one of the things that he mentioned, and I think it's a good point, is that doctors tend to be trusting while pharmacists tend to be suspicious. And this is one of the things that he was really hammering on to not only the narcotic enforcement detectives, but to pharmacists when he talks to them, is that doctors, somebody goes in and says, yeah, I've got a pain here, a little bit of pain and discomfort here, some suffering here. But it's the pharmacist that's really scrutinizing the script and looking at it, looking for the inconsistencies, looking for something that just doesn't smell right. And that's his big advice that he gives to the pharmacist is be suspicious. You have a right to be suspicious. You should be suspicious. You're that last set of eyes. And just like this presentation is called, you are that last line. I don't want to say the last line of defense. You're the last set of eyes that are going to see this before finally given that drug. And it's up to you. So start to pay attention, like I said, to the inconsistency, spelling, format, recognizing when somebody's coming in and it just doesn't look right, that there's something wrong with this prescription. And of course you can see here the suspicion. I don't know if you can see, but this guy right here, he's the tiger in zebra stripes. But be suspicious about it. Recognize, take that time to do it. I know one of the things that people have talked about is, with this SB 459 and, doctors, using the PMP to check out patients, some individuals said, well, the pharmacist should do it too. And I remember talking to one pharmacist about it. He's like, God, if I did that for everybody, I'd never get anybody out the door. It'd be so difficult. I mean, it's like every time I walk through a door, I have to check myself. How many times do you do that? So I don't know if any of you do. How many of you actually check the PMP when you're doing it? It's actually quite a bit. Wow. That's good to see. So we'll talk about the criminal investigative process. Again, Detective Coley over there, he's trying to hide behind his Duck Dynasty beard. He's one of the ones that actually does a lot of our pharmaceutical diversion cases here in northern Nevada. And when we get down to these cases, they're not difficult to investigate. But they're a little bit different than your typical narcotic case. When we talk about a typical narcotic case where we get information about some citizen who's selling unlicensed pharmaceuticals like methamphetamine and cocaine and marijuana from his house, we're not going after him because he's not using a business license. We're going because those are Schedule I controlled substances and we're going to enforce the law. But these cases typically are different, and we're not necessarily doing the same steps. We're not going undercover a lot of times. Although in some states they do. We're not using informants all the time, once in a while here and there. A lot of it is paper cases. It's actually getting the scripts, going and talking to the pharmacists, talking to the doctors, getting video surveillance. And when you see Coley doing his cases, that's exactly what he's doing. A lot of his stuff is the evidence he's putting together to present to the prosecutor to show that this individual did not have a right to be having that pharmaceutical script and to get that prescription medication. And so it's one of those cases that, again, the years that I was working narcotic enforcement actively, before I became a lieutenant, I was just a regular detective down on the line. Again, I'd bang my head on the wall because I'd see some of these prosecutors or other people in law enforcement think it's just a pill case. It didn't have that same glamour as a methamphetamine case or a marijuana case. I mean, everybody, when you're working dope, wants the big case. Everybody's, got the trophy shot photos of them with the big bales of dope and the cars that they seized and, the trophy shots, and then, here we come with like a prescription vial and here's our trophy shot like that. It's not as glamorous. But when you look at it, there is quite a bit to it. And just to kind of give you a perception of the danger with it, we actually had one of our undercover detectives back, I believe it was in 2008, who almost got seriously injured during an undercover buy when he's trying to buy pills. He's part of a prescription investigative unit in Las Vegas that we called FarmNet. And it's just one of those things that didn't go right, and they're buying pills, and here he is, he almost loses his life. Everybody thinks that happens, with the big undercover deals when you're buying, pounds of methamphetamine, kilos of coke, and bales of marijuana, and here it is, he's buying pills. So again, there's that perception. But I think in these last few weeks here with the case that happened in Reno, I think there's been kind of a wake-up call for a lot of people that say, yeah, this is a problem. Again, it's a problem that's been here for a while, and hopefully it'll be one that in time people start to recognize that this goes way beyond just simple abuse, that there's also a lot of profit, as we'll discuss here in a bit. So again, we talked about the documents that are necessary. Again, using Coley as the example, when he goes in, he's pulling that script. A lot of times he's just getting a copy of the script, but some prosecutors actually want the original script. When you look at the PMP is a good tool, but it's only a tool. It tells you that, hey, this individual, there's something going on here you need to take a look at, but it's a tool. It's not the actual evidence itself. That evidence you want are those fraudulent or forged scripts, or the script that individual has, and that's why when they go to the pharmacy, when they talk with you, or Coley talks with you, or the SET team members, that's what they're looking at, is to see those fraudulent scripts and start to piece their case together so they can give it to the prosecutor. Some prosecutors, like I said, want the original script, and if that's the case, you might see Coley having to get that from you and sign some type of certificate of affidavit, get a statement from you, so that he can use that as evidence, collect it, and then use that for his case. Now, I talked about the other felonies involved. We talked about burglary. Everybody has this idea of burglary that somebody dresses up in a ninja suit and is breaking through a window and creeping around and taking something. But burglary is actually just the going inside a structure with an intent to commit a crime inside. It's not actually breaking inside of it necessarily. And so when you look at the law, when we talk about burglary under 205-060. Except as otherwise prohibited or provided in subsection 5, a person who by day or night enters any house, room, apartment, tenement, shop, warehouse, and then we have store underlined. Store referring to where you work. The pharmacy, to obtain money or property or by false pretenses is guilty of burglary. When they go in there to pick up that fraudulent script, that's the burglary. They gone in with intent, that fraudulent script, that itself is the criminal tool. And when they go inside the building to try to pass it off, saying, hey, the doctor gave me, a prescription for 200 pills so I can cure my pain that I have, that's what they're looking at. And that's one of the things when we put together these cases, not only is it the fraudulent script, but the burglary. When we talk about forgery, so if you have somebody that's forging a script, this is another felony if you look at it. Counterfeiting the signature of a party or witness, intent to defraud. How many of you have recognized that right away when somebody gives you a script and you can see that it's already been copied several times? You can start to see like those black dots all over the script, and you can see, God, how many times has this been photocopied? Like 10, 20, 30 times, and the signature, it's like they try to trace over it with a big thick pen, and you can see like the little jet marks where it just didn't line up right. But this is another felony that when investigators that are doing their cases, like forgery or like Coley's doing, this is what he's adding to his list of charges when he submits it to the district attorney's office. You can see this is good stuff here. In case you can't sleep tonight because you've had too much coffee here, I'm serious, just read this. 5 minutes, you'll be out. It's better than any drug you guys can prescribe. So we talk about some of the NRSs that we as diversion investigators look at. It is unlawful for a person knowingly or intentionally to distribute a registrant of a controlled substance classified as Schedule 1 or 2, using the course of manufacture or distribution of controlled substance, assume falsely the title to represent himself or her as a registrant or other person authorized to possess a controlled substance, acquire or attempt to obtain or acquire possession of a controlled substance. So again, you can see that there's a lot more in the law that is here as far as what's going on with the pharmaceutical cases. Sign the name of a fictitious person. So when you look at NRS 453 pretty much is your drug statutes, and then 454 is your dangerous drugs. But you'll see that there's a lot of statutes. There's a lot of actual firepower here for prosecutors when they want to start charging an individual for any type of pharmacy or pharmaceutical related crime. So some of the other felonies we often see, the illegal use of a controlled substance. Again, if they're not supposed to have that controlled substance, they're getting it illegally, obtaining it through fraudulent means, and then they're going to use it. That in itself is a felony. Again, seeing multiple doctors, the doctor shopping. And then that's where we see the person, on the PMP where they're hitting multiple doctors or going to different places trying to get the script. And you'll see that. One of the things that we see here in Nevada is our doctor shopping. It's there. It's not as bad as some of the other states when you talk about like Florida, where they had a horrible problem. It was so bad with these pill mills, as they call them, that people from Tennessee, Chicago were coming down to get their Vicodin, their Lortab, all that stuff. Why do you have to travel from Chicago down to Palm Beach, Florida to get your medication? That doesn't make sense. But with Nevada, one of the things that we usually see, or I should say what we're starting to see, is more the increase of individuals with the doctor shopping, but the individuals associated with medical offices that have the ability to forge a script, alter the name or sign the name for the doctor, trying to get friends to pass those scripts off. And that's where itself can be kind of hard or difficult to try to determine whether that's a fraudulent script. Just to give you a little bit of history or perspective of what the DPS Investigation Division, who we are, when you look at Section 453, Nevada Revised Statute, and also 639, when it talks about our statute authority, as we said, we're one of the primary law enforcement agencies in the state of Nevada to investigate crimes involving prescription drug abuse and diversion. It's not to say that other agencies like the Sheriff's Office or the police departments can't. It's just when you look at the statute, when they talk about the board, when they're referring to the Board of Pharmacy and the division, what they're referring to is the investigation division here. And so, again, a lot of agencies after the passing of 459, where it allowed limited access to law enforcement officers who were directly investigating a script-related case where they can have access to the PMP. We have that as well. Coley has access to that. He actually does a lot of cases where he's reviewing that information to see, is this warranted to move further? But again, the PMP is a great tool, but it's just that, it's a tool. The real evidence is that script. Looking at what the individual had actually obtained and was trying to pass off to the pharmacy to you in order to obtain that controlled substance. Again, we talk about our statute authority here. Have any of you or many of you had, I guess, contact with any of the DPS investigators as far as scripts, if you've had them? Or has it just been more with the Sheriff's Office or patrol? The Sheriff's Office, very little? Okay. So in case, if you see a guy, a bearded guy there right there, looks like Duck Dynasty, then that's Coley. And he'll be coming in to do his cases. When we talk about administrative inspections, again, the NRS is specific as far as what our authority is to investigate those cases, to actually review those scripts. And when you look at NRS 639, 236, we'll get into it, where it talks about how agents of the Investigation Division of the Department of Public Safety, where we can examine those scripts. I know we've had some pharmacies before where they don't want to let us look at it. We're not trying to force our way in, but by statute, our investigators can look at those scripts. And so it's not a protected thing. You'll see some people, I don't want to give up that information. Well, unfortunately, the Nevada Revised Statute does allow for the DPS detectives to do that as part of our functions. Again, when we talk about it, usually what investigators like Coley will do is they will make copies. Again, they want that information, want to review that script. Most times what they're going to do is have you fill out an affidavit explaining the who, what, when, where, why. This individual came in on such and such a date. He tried to pass this fraudulent script. You recognize it to be fraudulent. And he's going to get a statement from you as to what you saw, observed, and try to get a statement, pretty much saying, yeah, this is a true and accurate copy of this script. Again, most times we'll try to leave that original script there if possible, but sometimes some prosecutors want it. Coley's been lucky so far in his prosecution that when he's given a copy or gets a copy from the pharmacies, that has been sufficient for the prosecutors, but some prosecutors want that true and accurate copy. And so if that's the case, what investigators like Coley will do is they'll take that original script and give you a copy of it and then certify, this was the date and time that I took it, and so that you've got records for yourself as well. So get down to what to do if you come across a script that you believe is fraudulent. Well, first, confirm with the issuing medical practitioner. You'd be surprised how many people, when they try to pass a script, and it's actually becoming a big business as we're starting to see how they actually have a backstory to these fraudulent scripts that they're trying to pass, where they'll have fictitious doctor offices or phone numbers or burner phones. These are those throwaway phones. And again, when we talk about how doctors are trusting and pharmacists are suspicious, this is where you get to do your detective work. And maybe CSI or maybe even one of those A&E Discovery Channel will come and do a special with you. But do what you can to verify that doctor is legitimate. Now, many of you know the doctors in your area. You're pretty familiar with the doctors. You're pretty familiar with the customers, the clients. You probably know their history better than the doctor sometimes. And you're like, why is he prescribing you that? give you a shot of this and kick you out the door. But do a Google search. If you don't recognize a doctor, do that. Do a Google search and call up that number. If you see 867-5309 and it lists Dr. Jenny, go in there, Google it, and try to figure out, is this legit? And this is one of the things in talking with some of my counterparts that they've been seeing in other parts of the country, is it's becoming a big business, and these people are setting up almost like a fake enterprise, trying to be able to have these, what looks like a legitimate doctor's office, and on face value, yeah, it looks legitimate, but as soon as you as the pharmacist start to scratch below the surface and start to see that, this number is a burner phone, or I can't get a Google office, or when I do get the Google search and I do the Google map, it shows this little strip mall. Does that make sense, or is it a mailboxes, etc., and that's what they're using as their address? So be suspicious about it. Next, obtain valid identification from the customer. Now here's a kind of a tricky one. You want to get that ID, and here's where you're going to want to try to stall that individual as much as possible. So you get the ID, you write the ID on the back of the script, and then here's where you want to do your best to be an actor. You remember there's no small roles, only small actors, and try to do what you can to stall that individual while you're calling either us or the set team or somebody to respond. And I'll let Coley talk for a second here, because I know that he's had this where I think the recent case you had, this happened where the individual was passing off fictitious ID, and then he gave the ID himself of his...
Yeah, just to add to that, the most important thing for me and for us is a copy of that ID, to identify that you can positively ID that person in that photograph is the person who's picking up that script. That's probably the most important thing, so we can later, down the road, identify them if we don't have the video surveillance or something else. So getting a copy of that ID is huge.
Again, NRS 453-431 allows you to request identification. I'm sure you all are doing it, but just in case somebody tries to challenge you, I don't have to give you my ID. Well, yeah, you do. It's in the law there. I don't make the rules, I just enforce them. Sorry. So, again, play that role. So once you've confirmed it's fraudulent, you go ahead and return the ID to the customer, but again, try to stall them. Try to stall that individual as long as you can so that you can get behind the desk, wherever it is your phone is, and make a call to us, to the set team, so they can come down there. Again, we'll try to get down there, but depending on our resources, it may be one of those deals that we can't get down there right away, and another law enforcement agency can, but they'll try to respond to somebody and try to actually get that individual while they're on scene. That's probably the best evidence you got right there, when the individual's there trying to pass a script and you're able to hook them. But sometimes it doesn't happen. In a lot of Coley's cases, again, the individual's already left. Some of his cases, he's getting them where it's already a week old, and he's now having to backtrack and, again, do his paper cases. But it's just so critical that we get as much information from you as possible. Did you remember anything specific about what he was wearing? What did he say? Anything that can help out our investigation. Because, again, Coley or the investigators are going to try to pull that video surveillance, too, so that they can identify him. I think that's one of the things that we've seen in some of these video surveillances is the video surveillance itself is kind of poor. I don't know if you guys have good surveillance cameras yourself, where they're positioned, but you might want to consider the optimal places or vantage points where you can get a good face shot so that when it comes back for the investigator to look at it, he can actually confirm, yeah, that is the individual. And we've seen that with a couple pharmacies now where they've got the general surveillance camera, but when it comes down to photographic evidence, there's really not much quality there. And then some places, I think they're usually recording over 30 days, depending on the pharmacy. So if you're unable to stall the suspect, now here's where you can tell them where the gig is up. Okay, inform him, and you can inform him nicely, or inform her nicely, however you want. And you believe the script is to be fraudulent, and they're going to probably, stand there with arms akimbo, and that's incredulous. I would never do that, But yeah, they're trying to pass that script. But that's when you get the chance to let them know that, hey, we know what's going on. This is a fraudulent script. I'm not giving you the medication, and I'm attempting to call the police on this. They'll probably, again, say every bad word at you, but you guys can take it. You're tough. So when that happens, get as much information. Again, I don't want to scare you into the idea that you're going to have to write a report. Everybody thinks that as soon as you have to put something on paper, it's like, I don't want to touch it. It's like the plague or leprosy. But again, you're going to have to do something that's going to help us out. And whatever you can do to put it on that paper, that will greatly help us out as far as prosecuting that individual. Big thing is once you've told the individual that you believe it's fraudulent, don't fill the script. And don't return the prescription back. Don't kind of gently pass the script back to them and say, hey, go try the other place down the street. You might have better luck. No, take that and keep that. Again, that's going to be our evidence. But most likely they're going to realize the gig is up and they're going to split and then they're going to try some other place. But if you get that reputation as a place that doesn't take that you're hard to beat, that you don't take fraudulent scripts, chances are you're going to start reducing those instances of people actually trying to pass bad paper on you. So again, we talked about it, that there's several felonies involved when we look at these pharmaceutical diversion cases when somebody's trying to attempt to pass a bad script. First of all, we got burglary. Again, that's a felony. Then attempting to obtain a controlled substance by fraud. That's another felony. And then usually that forged or uttered document, there's 3. So usually when the prosecutor is looking at these cases, he's already got 3 good felonies on an individual when we put together a case. And of course, they do the plea bargains and make the system work better. And most times somebody will plea down to a felony, take some type of diversion or other method of trying to escape these felonies. But the big thing is there's 3 good felonies that have now occurred, and what most people think is just that's somebody just trying to get some prescription medication. No, these are serious felonies here. So we talk about unlawful acts relating to distribution. So again, we talk about somebody who's getting these pills, and many of these individuals that are working now, and this is one of the things that we're starting to see throughout the state, and especially as we talked about with the PMP and more doctors starting to use it, and especially with the heightened sense that everybody has, is we're starting to see more groups and organizations trying to come in and try to get medication through a variety of ways, such as your Smurfs, these people that they work in groups and go out and this guy is able to get a couple hundred pills here, this person's able to get a couple hundred pills at this pharmacy, this person's able to get a few more here, and then they pull them together. It's like the old with methamphetamine production back in the early 2000s and the 90s, when you get the same thing, they call them the Smurfs, all these individuals run around trying to get the cold medication to try to make the methamphetamine that way. We're starting to see an increase a little bit with individuals doing the same thing. So again, we talked about the evidence with the photocopy, if you can, if that's real possible. Again, as much as you can for that case for us to put together. Document the date and time. This is going to be real critical. It doesn't sound like it is, I can remember it was, this date because that was the date that I stubbed my toe when I walked into work, and I kicked the dog. Whatever it is that helps you remember, but again, when we get that information on the statement, we need to know so that the prosecution, and again, I keep going back to this prosecution because this is what the prosecutor has to do. He has to show the jurisdiction. He has to show that it happened in his county or his area. He has to show the date and time. He has to show that the crime took place, that the individual, knowingly came inside your store to pass off a fraudulent script. And so they're going to want this statement. It doesn't have to necessarily be elaborate. We're not looking for literary masterpiece here. What we're looking for is just the basic details and to be accurate. You don't have to put in any items there to make it seem like it's better, just the facts. Just going back to Joe Friday, just the facts, ma'am. So in talking about these procedures, again, they're real basic, and I know you have the handout, and you can use that as a reference guide if something like this happens. But again, keep in mind that there's a lot of individuals trying to get the pain medications, these opioids, from you. It's your job to be that last set of eyes to try to keep them from getting them and doing what you can to be that check and balance. So we talked about some of the other ways that people are getting the pills and then some of these other considerations for you as pharmacists. We've talked about thefts. Again, one of the things that we're seeing across the country is the increase of thefts and individuals that are robbing the pharmacies, that are breaking in, committing these burglaries, whether it's during regular business hours or after hours, and trying to get the medications that way. And again, as we start to see more controls put in place, such as the PMP and other regulations, we can expect to see that these thefts and burglaries are going to go up. We also see doctors overprescribing medications to individuals. And again, you see these individuals who in turn sell it for profits. That's another area we see. I think that was kind of evident as what the news stories when we talk about the Dr. Rand case. So we talk about the increase in pharmacies, the robberies. Again, we're talking about that. We see it. And we talk about how the prescription monitoring program, great tool, but as that becomes more in use throughout the state, we're having the concerns that our individual is going to try to get the prescription drugs in other ways. So here's an interesting part. We talk about the math. And when we talk about the street value. Now we're using just some basic numbers here. We used $1,185 for somebody getting 1,000 pills based on just what it would go for, with the insurance payment or what you're getting it for. But just to keep it simple, if we look at 1,000 pills, an 80 milligram pill of oxycodone, that equals to $11.85 per pill, or roughly 15 cents per milligram. That's what is being sold through your pharmacy. On the street, the typical going rate for the sale of the same pill is $1 per milligram. That's usually what the street value is. Some guys, depending on the location, will sell it higher. But roughly 1 milligram equals $1. So that same pill, which you sell for $11.85 on the street or on the pharmacy, is now going for $80 on the street. So just imagine if anybody can get just their hands on 1,000 of these pills, these 80 milligram pills, at $1 per milligram, there's $80,000 right there. And just to show you how much is going on, our tactical diversion investigator in Las Vegas, he's being involved with so many of these cases where there are forfeitures. I was just reading one of his reports not too long ago where they seized over $450,000 in cash from an individual involved with pharmaceutical diversion. So again, when we talk about the money to be made in this, again, a lot of people are focusing on the addiction part. That's a serious part or a serious portion of pharmaceutical abuse. But look at how much money can be made on an individual that if they can get their hands or access to illegal scripts, how much money can be made. So just think about it, 1,000 pills. I mean, that's a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, is it? No, if these individuals have good access to it, big bucks, real big money, where we're talking about not only the cash seizures, but a lot of these people have big houses. The cars, our detectives are seizing, with the ones that are associated with the DEA task force. Sports cars, exotic race cars, these handguns. One guy had this big 50 caliber rifle that he had purchased for several $1,000s, and they seized that. The seizures just go on, but again, a lot of money to be made with illegal diversion. We can see some of the other common street values for diverted pharmaceutical medications, so like a Prazolam, Xanax, Ambien. When you look at it, $2 to $15 for a pill of Ambien, depending on the street value. If anybody has access to this, you can see that there's a lot of money that can be made with this. Dilaudid, the fentanyl patch. A lot of the agencies in the East are seeing a lot of the fentanyl patches being abused, such that people are actually smoking the patch itself. And so when you think about it, the patch has the liner, and it has that plastic backing to it, and they're actually trying to smoke that patch. Methadone, anywhere from $8 to $50 per pill. Morphine, I mean, you look at these and you kind of look in amazement, but this is what's happening, what's going on the streets. When we talk about promethazine, I know Coley wanted to talk about it real quick, purple drink. One of the things to be cautious of, the individuals who are specifically calling you up, hey, do you got the purple stuff? Yeah, that's probably a good clue that you should pay attention. Hey, somebody's specifically wanting this. No, I don't want the pink stuff. I kind of get an upset stomach with the pink stuff, kind of like Pepto-Bismol. And I want the purple drink. And you can see that they add it with Sprite, and there's even kind of the social context to it. It looks cool. But again, this is something that's hitting the streets, and as Coley said, he's seeing more and more of the promethazine where people are trying to obtain it and divert it. So a few other considerations, and we'll wrap this up. One of the things that I know Coley has told me that he's seen, and our investigators down south have seen, is the individuals associated with doctors' offices that have access to scripts and issuing them out to friends, family members, and these individuals in turn then are going to the pharmacies and getting the prescriptions that way. So keep in mind, these ones are going to be tougher to distinguish. And again, you got to put on your different hat here and be a sleuth and try to determine, is this legit? And what you can do to keep that from going. out on the street. We talk about robberies. I don't know if any of you guys have already discussed what to do in the event of a robbery. These are considerations, and it's surprising in talking with Mr. Kirtley how many pharmacies don't actually have a plan in place as far as what to do in the event of a robbery. And we talk about it. Make sure you have your plan in place so that all the pharmacy staff know what to do. Don't argue with the suspect. Don't ask to see a weapon. Wow, is that a Glock 40 or was that a Kimber? Just don't do that. Big thing, don't go anywhere with the suspect. Try to stay there as much as you can. We talk about loss prevention, and this is another key area for pharmacies, is perpetual inventory, your visibility. We talked about your camera systems and your inventory. Are you keeping track of what's going on your shelves and what's coming on and off? Your witnesses. When we talk about investigative experience, your background checks, that goes to checking the employees that are working at the pharmacy. Not to say that you don't trust them, but again, pharmacists are suspicious. Do what you can to make sure that these are the right individuals that should be working for the pharmacy. And then, of course, your audit and shrink reports. So we talked about you being the last set of eyes, and you truly are. When we talk about the doctors, issuing the scripts, and they're supposed to be checking the PMP, but really it comes down to you're that choke point to where individuals who are trying to get the scripts illegally, they have to go through you. And you're the goalkeeper. So again, be suspicious. You don't have to be paranoid, but there's a good thing to be said about being suspicious about things. Again, you're aware of the individuals in your area. You're aware of the doctors in your area, especially these smaller communities like Carson City and Gardnerville and Minden and Dayton. You have a pretty good sense of who's who in the zoo as far as who's working where, what their prescribing habits are. You can recognize what a doctor's signature looks like probably, decipher it, but you have a good idea of what's going on, and even with a lot of your regulars and knowing what might be strange for their habits. We talked about the tremendous profits. Again, there's a lot of money. Don't just focus on just the abuse. Again, that is a critical point. I'm not trying to minimize it, but a lot of what we're seeing too are the individuals that are trying to make a tremendous profit because they can. Again, drugs are about money. And there's a lot of money to be made with pharmaceutical drugs, especially when they can get legitimate quality stuff versus the junk that's on the street. We talked about if you're confronted with a fictitious or fraudulent script, what to do. Again, in the handout, gives us some good pointers of what to do in the event that it comes across your pharmacy desk on how to handle that and who to call. Any questions? No questions? All righty. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.